This week's episode of the And She Looked Up podcast is brought to you by Fine Lime Designs. If the name sounds familiar, that's because it's my design business and the work I do there helps make this podcast possible. If you love colorful and whimsical art prints, greeting cards, and journaling stickers, then head over to my Etsy shop for a delightful browse. Just search for Fine Lime, like the fruit, designs, all one word, on Etsy, or click the link in the show notes. And now, on with this week's episode. Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I am doing a special episode because I have two guests, so there's three of us talking for the first time today, and I am welcoming back Heather Travis, who pops by once a month to chat about the business side of being a creative. And I'm also welcoming back Puneeta Chitwal Varma, who is, if you have been listening to the podcast for a long time, she was one of my very first guests on the show. And we're going to be talking about something that is very important to all three of us. And I think it's becoming more and more important to more creatives and artisans out there. And that is reducing waste in our businesses. So this is a big, juicy topic that we're going to be covering today, but we have all kinds of things that we want to discuss with you. And I think one of the interesting things is we also asked for some feedback from people who follow the podcast, who are creatives and makers, to talk about ways that they're reducing waste in their businesses. And so we're going to be sharing some of their things that they're doing as well. But before we get into that, hello, ladies.
Hello. Hello.
So this is going to be interesting. I've never recorded with more than one person, so it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error for us. But before we dive into the ins and outs, I thought the first thing to do would be to do a quick round the table on why this is so important to each of us, because I think we all have our own reasons why we want to do this. So Puneeta, you are all about sustainability. You are all, particularly in the food space. So maybe you could tell all of us why this is so important to you.
Sustainability, I feel like I'm standing on a soapbox and talking about sustainability all day, every day to my kids. And so I'm so glad to talk to other smart people like you and Heather about this. But sustainability used to be a pillar in my business. When I started my business, my work is I often write for Maple and Marigold, which is my business. And then I write for other people as well. So I'm a writer and a better food advocate and a content creator. And so sustainability was this one of 5 very important pillars for my content creation. So every time I created content around culture or food, family, and that's how my business had started as a conversation around family and culture. And sustainability always fit in beautifully and made this really colorful and beautiful puzzle for me. But over the last couple of years, sustainability is not just one of these 5 important values that lead my life and my business, but it's become kind of the foundation because it's so clear with all of this research, the IPCC report, the the United Nations Environmental Program, FAO, that's the Food and Agricultural Organization. I can drop acronyms from here till Sunday. But there is so much research out there that is showing us that we are not doing our part to for the health and prosperity of the planet. And it is not only detrimental to our own ability to thrive in the long run, but it may actually impact our immediate ability to survive. For many geographies, it might actually impact where we live. Can we live here? Can we build a house here? Is our village, is our town going to see unexpected floods and wildfires? Out west, wildfires are a huge problem. So sustainability is something that started off as something we should do this for the world and leave a legacy behind for our kids. And over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it's so clear that it's not just something philanthropic that we do for the world. It's something we need to all selfishly do for our own survival.
Well said. Yes.
I'm nodding vigorously.
Yes.
Which you can't see on a podcast. I'm nodding vigorously.
Yes. Yeah. So Heather, how about you? Why is this so important to you?
Saying it's always been important is glossing over, I think, a lot of things for a lot of us. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I grew up teaching like, Mom, this is how we recycle. And I was like part of the generation who thought it was like good to put things in the recycling box, right? And now, funny enough, before we started recording, I was just down at the post office. And one of my main methods of shipping things is pulling things out of the recycling box. So Pringles tubes or cake boxes or whatever. And I was at the post office and the postman always jokes with me about, oh, what is it today? Like when he guesses the dimensions, he tries to figure out what packaging I used. But anyway, it's becoming more and more important. And part of it for me, funny enough, stems not in I'll call it the back end. So like sourcing supplies, but also shipping. For me, it's like the actual creation of the art, in that I create art primarily that lives in rooms where children are. And I want that art to stay with them their whole life. I want them to take it with them to university and when they move into their first apartment. And it might go from bedroom to bathroom to hallway to whatever. And it might eventually land in their kid's room or something, but it's something that lives for a long, long time. And because I really rally against what I call shitty winners art. And it's not that the art is shitty, it's that it's mass produced just to get it into people's homes. And then they decorate 2 years later because they don't like that anymore. And that just seems so like, and this is coming, like I used to be a home decor blogger. Like I was all about that stuff and more and redoing, but now to me, the redo and the art and the creation, it's the sustainability of it. Like, can I buy this table at the restore? Can I find it old and make it new again? Can I repurpose things? And then from there, it spills into, okay, I'm not going to have a pretty unboxing experience when you get my art. It is going to come. Like I just sent out a whole bunch of polymer clay earrings literally in Pringles tubes. But that's what I had. And to me, it was like, perfect. Now it goes in their recycling. As opposed to my recycling, but at least it served its purpose one more time than it was originally destined to do. And I didn't go out and buy more, I think for me, it's the sustainability is about less and not constantly more. That's where I'm sitting at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I just had to write down a little note about Pringles tubes because they are such a great size for shipping prints that you need to roll up.
I'll tell you, and the shorter size too. So I have been using the long ones and the shorter ones. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, with the little plastic lid, it traveled very well. All recipients of the Pringles tubes have said it traveled beautifully. So
I
Yeah.
used to store kids, my kids used to do these rainbow loom activities. So they had these frames and they actually fit perfectly in the long size. So in the big Pringles, which
Yes.
at one point I am really it's an awkward confession, but at one point we had quite a few of those.
Exactly. Anyway, yeah. And for you, Melissa, what is it for your business?
Yeah. So, I grew up with the city I live in was one of the very first cities in the country to put in the Blue Box program. So we were one of the guinea pigs for it. But prior to that, my mom used to pack us into the station wagon with all the glass bottles and all the newspapers and drive us all the way out to the recycling depot, which our city actually had. And my mom was like the granola mom before it was cool to be a granola mom. And in the 70s, you just kind of, you were very aware that your mom was different and that wasn't the cool thing because it was all about white bread and, the Wonder Bread sandwiches and all that kind of thing. But where it really hit home for me was last year. I don't like waste. So I've always kind of lived by the motto, the 3 R's, with reduce being the first one, and then reuse and then recycle. So I've never liked waste, but last year I live on the Southwest coast and we just had environmental crisis after environmental crisis last year. And these were crises that had huge impact. We had this heat dome that hit us in June where we were hitting temperatures of 45 degrees and the temperature wasn't dropping at night like it normally would. So there was no relief. And we had 600 people die in Vancouver as a direct result of that. And then because we had 2 more heat domes as the summer went on, not quite as severe, but still in the 40s. And all of that caused tremendous drying out of the soil, which led to an even bigger crisis in the fall when we had this massive, we used to call them pineapple expresses, but now they have something like a atmospheric river, I think they call them, where essentially you're getting anywhere from 100 to 200 millimeters of rain within 24 or 48 hours. And we get a lot of rain in Vancouver, but 200 millimeters is a lot.
Yeah.
And so what had happened is not only did we have catastrophic flooding in places where we expect flooding, but also in places where we've never had flooding, because the soil was so dried out from this summer we also had these tremendous landslides that washed out infrastructure, to the point where Vancouver was completely cut off from the rest of the country. And Vancouver is the home to the biggest port in Canada. It is where all our goods, particularly from Asia, come in, and there was no way to get them to the rest of the country. We couldn't do it by road, we couldn't do it by rail, and it was like that for weeks. I had friends who were trapped, in the City of Hope because they were an hour away from home, but there was no highway, there was no road to get there. And it really just made me realize, this climate change is not a thing of the future. It's here right now, and it is impacting us very dramatically. And I didn't even talk about wildfires, but BC, we have wildfires every summer. And this year, I had multiple friends who were affected by wildfires, by either losing property or having to be evacuated or on alerts. And, one of my girlfriends lives in the Okanagan, and she said it is at the point now where I cannot go away on vacation in the summer because I have to be here in case something happens to my property. And that's
terrifying.
That's scary, right?
Sure.
So it's just made me really realize that a slow approach isn't good enough anymore. We need to move.
No, it isn't. It was almost as if the slow approach was right for us 10 years ago. And now this is something that's at our doorstep that we need to handle. Now.
Yeah. It's urgent.
It's urgent.
And so that's why I thought this would be a great episode. And I know Heather and I have talked about this in the past off air, where we've talked about how working actively to do this. And Puneeta, I know this is such a core piece of who you are and what your business is. And I know you really focus on food, but I know that this is part of other things that you do as well. So I think one of the things I just thought we cover first before we get into the nitty-gritty and the tips is, first of all, this isn't something I think that people need to get perfect immediately. Like, I think it's something that we that could be almost overwhelming and make you not do anything if you think you have to get it all right first time. But it's something we all need to start doing actively, like now. And so maybe if this is new to you and you're not sure where to start, maybe start with focusing on one key area of your business. Maybe it's your shipping, maybe it's your packaging, your raw materials, and then moving on to another piece of your business so that you keep moving and do it in baby steps. But I thought the other thing that we should talk about is what waste in our businesses actually is. But before we get to that, when we were prepping for the episode, Puneeta, you mentioned this really great point about the term eco and how we often think of it as, the environment, of sustainability, of being green. And yet eco is the first three letters in the word economy. And you brought up some really interesting points about that. And I thought maybe you could elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, it's exactly what you said, Melissa, that the word eco is often regarded as something that is connected to the environment, ecology. Being eco-conscious means, well, it represents being more environmentally conscious, right? But it's also the prefix of the word economy. And in just the way we think about the economy, we often think of efficiency and productivity and profit and how do we make more and spend less. That's the umbrella. But perhaps when this word was discovered, the first person who wrote that word down, they actually meant how the money, how the earnings would actually fit in with our environment and how it would fit in well. And that's not happening right now. We often think, we often hear all these stories, right? In the thirst for, there's all these stories about mercury dumping in grassy narrows, and there's all these stories that companies, corporations have taken these steps that are detrimental to the environment, hugely detrimental to the environment, because they wanted to save money, cut corners, and deliver to their shareholders. I see that phrase all the time and it makes my skin crawl. I mean, I'm a shareholder in so many companies that say exactly that, and I want to, right, bang my head on the wall. But the word economy, it was always meant to be working in harmony between people and our environment. And I feel small and medium business owners, we have the power right now to go back to that original meaning behind the word and make the change. And I see big corporations doing that too. So if we all get together, well, we can do tons.
Yeah, I think you have a good point there. And it's, I love reframing the word economy with how eco fits into that. And it really makes you think. And I think we also have to understand that being a small business and making profit doesn't mean we can't be environmentally responsible. Like, they don't have to be at odds with one another. So
yes, and going back to what Heather, you mentioned about using less, that's really the core of being environmentally responsible in our business and in our life. If we use less, we will spend less, right? It's not just about buying the cool, minimalistic, Instagram recommended, beautiful new sustainable item, right? I see them all the time, and the feeds of so many people are beautiful, and they still want us to buy more. And that's really not the point of being sustainable. If we use less, we would spend less and we would waste less.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things to think about when we're thinking about waste in our business. So I think the big one that I think we all think about is physical waste. So like packing, shipping materials, raw ingredients, all that type of thing. But there's actually a few others that we need to consider. And another big one that ties right into the environment is fuel and power. So the things like electricity, which we need to run all our gadgets, the batteries that we are constantly recharging, the gas that we use to heat our homes. We use gas in BC. I don't know what you use in the rest of the country, but in BC it's gas, and our electricity is hydroelectric. But there's also heating and cooling. One of the things that, you know, when you have these heat waves and then you also have these dramatic cold snaps and polar vortexes and things in the winter, is we use more heat and we use more air conditioning, and that all uses power and resources. And I think sometimes we don't think about that in terms of our businesses. So, and the other two.
I didn't have heat in my studio. I'll tell you that.
You did not have heat in your studio for a long time.
I didn't have heat in my studio. I sure as shit shot about that, because I at one point had like multiple space heaters plugged in, and I remember looking around going, wow, the cost of this painting is just skyrocketing right now.
I get that. Even when we had renos, we still were having renovations, and we ended up not having heating in one part of the house. I mean, we weren't living here, so it kind of worked out. But for the workers, they had 2 space heaters running in that part, and the rest of the house is fine. And yes, it costs money. I don't know exactly how much it cost us, but it cost us a few $100s for just that 2-3 week period.
Yeah. I remember when I lived in London, when I was fresh out of university, every apartment in my apartment building had an electricity meter in your apartments. You could actually see it ticking.
Wow.
And it made me because I was on a super tight budget, it made me very conscious of my electricity
But
consumption.
you know, it's the awareness. Like if we knew exactly, if it was easy enough for me to see that ticking meter and I knew in my head, I feel because I don't know enough and all I have to do is go downstairs and turn the heating up, I'm more negligent. I mean, I think about if I knew that this is costing me this much money, and then I also knew that continuation, that this is actually impacting the environment in this way, which takes me back to carbon footprint. I mean, we should have a rating for products of their carbon footprint, right? Because if we knew the impact, our little change of not buying this or taking this action or turning the heating down or up, if we knew immediately, we would. I mean, I think half the battle is won with just awareness, right?
Well, it's true. I mean, they always say that you vote with your dollars, you vote with your wallet, right? But if you don't have all the information in front of you, it's really hard to vote in a way that you feel good about. But if we actually knew, if that was all labeled on the packaging, it would make it very easy for us to vote with our dollars. So that's something interesting to think about. A couple of other things in terms of what waste can mean. There's also time. We always forget that time is one of our most finite resources. We don't get it back. It's not renewable. That's something to consider. And also human resources, which is another thing. A lot of people listening, none of us have employees, and a lot of you listening won't have employees, but you may work with contractors and VAs and things like that. And that is another resource that it can be really easy to waste if you're not careful. So let's dive into like the actual nitty gritties of what we can all be doing or things that we're doing. So Heather, you mentioned early on a couple of the things you're doing, but maybe you could tell us some of the things that you are really focused on right now in terms of reducing waste in your business.
So a big one for me is the unboxing experience or receiving experience. And for me, again, the core, like the reason you bought my art is for the art, not for the box it comes in. And so I want that to be the yay moment on Instagram. And in fact, I would love to change the narrative that people are like, holy crap, this came in a Pringles box. That if I could fit one of my paintings in a Pringles box, that would be amazing. But like, I want that to be part of the experience. And I reuse like all of my thank you cards. When I send out a note, it's literally a something that I've done in Chart on Saturday. It's a doodle and I fold it in half and I say, thank you so much for buying my painting and enjoy the blah, blah, blah. It's not a custom made thing. Also for me, and I think it's different than some other businesses like yours, Melissa, where you're sending out things constantly. Like I can send out 3 paintings and then I cannot sell anything for 6 months. And so having things on hand that's pre-printed, pre-packaged, all of that seems very wasteful because it's just sitting there. So most of my shipping materials come from the bike shop, which we've talked about before in terms of the amount, like you want to talk greenwashing. The bicycle industry is like tippy top of the scale in terms of greenwashing. The amount of waste and toxic materials that come out of our bicycle store are ridiculous. But I take advantage. I use the cardboard from the shop. I use all the bubble wrap so I keep the good stuff basically, and I have a stash of it, and that I'm willing to keep a stash of in the garage because I didn't pay for it. It came to me. It was going to just go back out again. So I'm sort of trying to give it an extended life to what it already had. That's a big one for me. I'm experimenting with new paints right now. And a big one for me is actually the packaging that the paint comes in, because a lot of it is plastic tubes. What happens with that plastic tube? Where do I throw it out? I would love to make my own paints and put them in like mason jars so that I'm in control of, but then there's like so much that I'm trying to dive into right now with that. And then honestly, in advance of this episode, I had literally never thought, and I promise you, I can't believe I'd never ever thought, for instance, of like when I buy canvases and my stretcher frames, I've never thought of the source of the wood as an example of where the wood comes from that goes into my stretcher frames. Is it sustainably sourced? I don't know. So you said earlier, Melissa, in terms of nobody's perfect. We're all learning. I'm a pretty competitive with my own self person. So for me, I'm very results oriented. Like, did I accomplish it? Yes or no? And to me, that gives me my pass fail. But with things like this to me, and I've applied it in my personal life, it's all about effort. I grade myself on the effort. Did I try? Did I try to find something? Yes, I did. Okay. Was it good enough? No, it wasn't great, but I tried. Like, did I work out today? Yes. That's the effort, right? Was it the perfect? No, right? And so I grade myself on trying, and I try to do better more and more. But I do, like, honestly, I have a garbage bag in my studio upstairs. I'm shocked at how quickly it fills up with stuff. And I paint. Like, where does all this garbage come from? Like, how am I accumulating garbage? And I even thought of it. I just bought new paintbrushes recently. I've fallen in love with a new brush. The handle is plastic. I go through brushes, like I chew through brushes like crazy. And so when it's done, or I forget it in paint and it gets sticky, and I'm a really forgetful, so like I leave it and things get ruined. If it was wood, it could decompose, but it's plastic, so it's not. And so that, like, all of those things, but it's my favorite brush. So it's like, hey, you have to, I find it's a constant evolution and a constant, I don't want to say struggle, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it all the time. And this, in advance of this, has actually caused me to think even more about further things.
And you definitely get points for trying. Like, I just want to jump in and say that, because a lot of this effort around sustainability comes with guilt. And I've had that guilt. I still have it. I'm drinking tea today that I should not have bought, but I bought it a year ago. And now I'm thinking, should I? Because I don't buy the bagged tea anymore, the tea bags. I buy the tea leaves. But in our packing and unpacking, I found stuff that we had from years ago. And so I'm telling myself, I'm not going to see the best before end date. And I'm just going to use that tea. And so that is my try, right? And
yes.
So yes, we give ourselves a point for trying, because the trying is hard work.
And what are you going to do with that tea otherwise? You would throw it out. And then how is that? How is that?
Yes, absolutely. But it makes me think of, how little I thought about things when I bought tea, for example, 2 years ago. I mean, how little I thought about it, because I totally didn't. And that to me has been the change, right? And it's happened in so many of us, that the wildfires and the heat dome and the landslides, like all of that is making us think about all of this.
I just wanted to say, I think the thing is, and I think this is why this is so important to us as creators, is that we have a platform and an opportunity. Like if somebody receives a package or a food item or reads a blog post and there's a message in there around, this is why it's coming in a Pringles can, as an example. Note to Pringles, you need to sponsor the podcast. But if you're bringing awareness to it. If you post on your website, if you say have a YouTube, or you do something that says, this is why my packaging is this. Melissa, you talked about it on our last episode in terms of values, and that podcaster or the YouTuber who shares, this is how I'm updating my sustainability all the time. If we can use our platform and tell people, then they can then expect that from others. Like if we're all showing that we're all learning together, I think that's a part of the power that we as creators can use, is not only do it ourselves, but like encourage and inspire others to do it.
Yeah.
To make that one little, right? Like if we all make
Yes, definitely. Puneeta, what are some of the things that you are actively doing in your business to bring down waste?
Well, at my end, I'm the educator. So my business and my work is to teach people and educate how we need to all reduce what we have, reduce what we use, reduce what we buy. The 3 R's are so important, right? And to reuse what we can. There is so much that we can reuse, whether it's those bags that the frozen veggies come in, or Ziploc bag. So the education part is a big part of what I do every day. And then at my personal end, so it's hard for me to separate the education with what I do, because I work from home. I have worked from home before. Working from home was cool. And so turning out the lights, making sure the stove is off and I'm not using too much electricity, and the lights, and turning the gas off when it's not needed, is just, it's work and home that overlaps, because I work from home. But also in terms of food waste, right? The work that I do in teaching people to reduce waste is what I do on TV and on social media, but it's also what I do in my real life. Last night we had broccoli chips on the sides. Broccoli chips. It's the stalk of the broccoli. So if you buy the whole head of broccoli instead of just the crown, then you can make chips out of. I did an Instagram live on Sunday, and I showed, as a bonus, I showed people how to slice up the stalk and, 1/4 inch, slice up the stalk, peel away the woody fibrous bit, if there's any. I had such beautiful, fresh, local broccoli, greenhouse grown. Yeah, we had broccoli chips. And instead of that big woody stalk ending up in the compost heap, it filled our bellies. And so there's so much we can do, right? And I do that in my personal life and in my work. So, and it all kind of overlaps.
I'm that weird person who likes to eat the stalks of broccoli and asparagus. Those are my favorite parts.
I can't imagine how many people throw it away. I mean, there's so much flavor and nutrition in that. And yes, I like the chewy texture.
The chewy part of
yes,
I like that.
Yes. My mom used to make this dry curry out of the cauliflower stem. So the broccoli stem is slightly less woody than the cauliflower stem. And the cauliflower stem is delicious, because if you slice it right, and I really need to do a video on this, but if you slice it right, it almost has this texture of ribs where you can peel, because it's so woody on the one side. It's like the corn ribs and the cauliflower ribs. Okay, I need to really trademark that, cauliflower ribs. But you can peel away the juice. Yeah. And then you're left with the woody part, and then it's totally delicious. Yeah, I'm that person too, so I'm glad we met.
The broccoli stalk is the dog. I'm looking at him right now. Is the dog's favorite snack. So whenever broccoli comes out, he's like on it, and so I chop it off, and he runs away and just is like, it's his favorite thing. But I would always keep it, and this is maybe my Polish grandma, but like that. that was never wasted. That was always thrown in. There's a baggie in the freezer. We're like the baggie in the freezer household where you throw the things and then make your soup stocks, and it just,
Yeah. I think for those of us kind of in our age bracket, our grandparents lived through the Great Depression. Like my grandmother reused everything. Nothing got thrown out. She was a huge gardener. All her plants were in Maxwell hot coffee tins, and that was my favorite thing to do as a kid, was to rearrange all the coffee planters on her deck. But everything, nothing gets wasted. And both my grandparents were like that. So they just came from a point in time where they grew up where you didn't know if you were going to have enough to eat tomorrow. So you kept everything. So yeah, very, very different. And I think in terms of myself, I've been focusing on packaging mostly. And I'm trying to move to a point where all my packaging is compostable, minimal and compostable. And I found a few good suppliers in Canada that makes some good stuff for that. But I'm always thinking about, my paper. I do a lot of printed goods, printed stationery. So I'm constantly thinking about paper. I am really having an internal struggle when it comes to stickers. Stickers are not great for the environment. They're not really recyclable. So,
that's the struggle I had with glitter. Glitter is nothing.
Yeah.
It does nothing. And there was a stage in our life where the kids loved glitter.
Everybody loves glitter.
Stickers on everything, right? We had a dresser that was covered with it. And what do you do with it? Exactly. But I think it's just once you know, then you can do better, right?
That's the key. You have to know.
It's Maya Angelou's quote that she says it so beautifully. But I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better.
Exactly.
Yes, perfectly says it. And I think that's kind of the key of this, is that you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. But part of our responsibility as business owners is we have to learn. We have to actively seek out better ways to do things. And as we do that, we'll get better and we'll do better. And the thing about it is that we can always do better. So yeah, let's go into some of the things that you can think about in your own business at home for those of you listening. So a big one is, and this is going to vary so widely across the spectrum, but a big one is raw materials and ingredients. So all of us who are makers, who are artisans, we have raw materials. Even Puneeta, your raw material is ingredients, right? Heather, it's paint. For me, it's things like markers and paper. So I think it's really important for us to think about looking at our businesses and looking at how much of that stuff that we use gets tossed, how much of it gets recycled, and how much of it we could repurpose. And I actually do want to read one of the people who responded to our call out. Her name is Jessica Jensen. She runs the business Running with Scissors. And she said in her response that this is something I think about a lot, as some of my creations result in waste, like plastic backing, stained fabric, etc. So I do the best I can. I use every last bit of material, paper, vinyl, fabric, etc. So I have organizers for all my scraps and always reach for those first. I reuse whatever I can. I used old mini blinds for garden markers. So she creates a lot of different little things that you can use around your home. She used shoelaces for mask straps from laces we didn't use from new shoes. She uses cut up old shirts for making her scrunchies. And she donates everything she can to an elementary teacher, like cardboard tubes, scrap paper, art supplies that she'll never use. And she recycles every single thing I can. Her business is mostly making custom personalized items like shirts, signs, etc. But she also does paper crafts and sewing. So I thought, that's somebody who is really thinking about everything that she uses and how she can give things a second life when it comes to her raw materials. And I think that's really important, particularly if you're using hazardous raw materials, which some of us do. I know, Heather, you've mentioned paints are
Yep.
not
And my
something.
spray paint, like it's toxic, getting rid of it, the cans, the aluminum, the aerosol, all of it. And like paint pens, I'm in love with oil paint pens and acrylic paint pens. That's a big old plastic tube it comes in. Like all of those things I think about. And then when I order them, if I can't get them at my local art supply shop, because there have been paint shortages, big time paint shortages this year, and I order online, the packaging that it comes in when I get it. And so then that goes into my stash of stuff to hold on to send back out to other people. But still, like, the amount of plastic that comes into my house that's unwanted is shocking. Yeah, but I think the toxic for sure, because I am the first person, like when it's the toxic waste day, you have to, drive to our local dump and you have to have it all in the trunk of your car. It has to be all perfectly organized, and they know me. They're like, oh, it's the lady with all the spray paint cans again. Hey, hello, because it's a ridiculous quantity that I go through, truly. And I really do think about it.
Yeah, I have a plastic bag in my basement that is full of used printer cartridges waiting to go to I print a lot in my business, and I go through cartridges, and it's fine when it's one or two cartridges that, you just take out. But when you see the plastic bag sitting downstairs, it's a recycled grocery bag. So you see it sitting by the door and how full it is. It really hits home. Like, this is just me. So I am shopping for EcoTank printers at this point, but because my printer's on its last legs. But things like that, you don't realize until you see it all piled up. Like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff.
And not even funny enough, in terms of, you just said shopping for a printer, like all of us are using computers. We have technology. We're all wearing earphones right now, recording this. Like all of that technology comes from somewhere. And that, like, Brian and I have been thinking about it a lot in terms of the bike shop with the supply chain issues we've been having this year. And there's a bike shop in the US that just said, I'm no longer accepting products from any of my vendors that come from China. As a blanket statement, not against China necessarily, more against the political regime. And it was sort of a rally against, if we're going to ban Russia, then let's ban China, because it's kind of samesies here. And that's like eliminating like 90% of your product. Like that's literally changing your business model. And so that's, I think, part of where the fear comes in for a lot of people, is that making a change could in fact be changing your business. And that's where I think sometimes, like in my personal life, the changes that I have found the hardest to make are the ones that you do day to day. It's like the repetitive ones, like your shampoo, which is so funny. It should be the easiest one to change, but I find it's the hardest. And it's those habits in your business that make it really tricky, like in terms of sourcing materials and buying our computers, and like that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think I use Copic markers for my illustrations. I most of what I do is alcohol-based marker illustration, and I use Copic markers. And I, for years, was said, "Why are you using those? They're so expensive," and they are expensive. There are cheaper ones out there that do just as good a job. But my Copic marker, and I was going to show you,
refill them, can't you?
They're refillable. The nibs are replaceable. Like that plastic marker can last me for decades.
Yeah.
As opposed to all my other markers that I use, where when it's out, it goes in the garbage, or Staples has some recycling facilities for pens and things like that. So yes, I pay $9 or $10 a marker, but over the course of its lifespan, it is far cheaper for me to have that Copic marker, and far more environmentally responsible for me to use those markers. So, those are I think sometimes we look at the sticker shock. And we don't necessarily work out what that actually costs us in the long run. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and what you say about the plastic markers, I think plastic has a very important place in society. And the reason it was discovered was to make life easy for people, right? And convenient and hygienic and safer. And so, yes, it's the single-use plastic that is awful. So if because I see this with the kid stuff all the time, they expected to just use it once and then discard it. I think that's the stuff that really gets to me, that I have changed about the way we buy things. Because if we were buying, something and using it the one time and throwing it away, then that is a huge burden on the environment and on waste management and disposal and all of that. But if you were using acrylic paints and then using them for a painting, or you're using a marker that you use for years and it's plastic, fine. I mean, those are all great decisions, because the point is to use things till they run out, right? Instead of using it once and then throwing it away.
Yeah. So there's a difference between using a plastic marker that will stay with me.
I'm all for plastic. I'm all for plastic, as long as we're not doing the whole, multiple use. The Tupperware containers that I've had for 3 years, they're plastic and they're fine. But every time I share them on Instagram, I get, I wouldn't think you would have bought plastic. Well, one, at that time, I didn't know any better. And two, I've had these. Now they're stirred with turmeric and everything else, and they're doing great, and they are not Instagram worthy, but right, I'm going to use them till they start falling apart.
I literally have Tupperware in my kitchen that is as old as I am, and I am 49. So it's stuff my mom bought when she first came to Canada. I went to her first Tupperware party, like that old
stuff to scoop up at Valley Village is the vintage Tupperware. And I go straight for it because the colors, but also there is nothing better, and they have lasted our lifetime. I don't
ever. It's not like the flimsy stuff that you get now that's that cracks and is
exactly.
Yeah, but there's a difference between using something like that that's going to last you decades, and using something like when I put a print or a card in a plastic sleeve, that plastic sleeve is going to go in the garbage. Might go in soft recyclable, I can't say that. Anyway, the soft recyclable bag or bin or whatever. For the odd person who is going to take that bag of soft packaging to their main recycling depot because they don't do it at curbside or whatever, but most people are going to chuck it in the garbage. So if I can move to something that's compostable or biodegradable, I prefer compostable, then that's a better, at least it can go in the compost, or it's made from plants, and it's going to not matter so much if somebody gets rid of it after the first use. So
absolutely, compostable is right up there in terms of choosing environmentally responsible, because it breaks down and it composts away in the soil. Biodegradable is greenwashing at best, because biodegradable really means that it's going to break down into smaller and smaller pieces. And so there are companies who are saying that you could totally have biodegradable plastic, which kind of goes against the whole spirit of making it more sustainable, because all you're doing is breaking it down, and then microplastics in our bloodstream, right? And then the third thing is the recyclable. I wanted to just address that here. So only 9% of the plastic in Canada is actually recycled, which means 91% of what we put in our blue bin it ends up washing up on our seashores. So years ago, when we were being told that, hey, let's recycle, this is the safer, more long-term choice, and we're making, again, environmentally responsible decision, was completely false. Because as a parent, if my kids came back with a 9% score, would we think that is an acceptable rate? Would we think that is something that is an okay thing? But we accept it for recycling, right? I mean, that's the closest I can come to. I mean, 9% is a ridiculous success rate for something.
Agreed. Yeah.
And yes, so recycling, I think reusing is the only way that we can make a long-term switch for packaging work. Recycling just doesn't work at this point, because it's not being done, not in the way it's currently set up.
No, and go ahead, Heather.
Sorry, Melissa, go ahead. I was just going to say, and that when you were thinking, Melissa, in terms of like when somebody receives it, what are they doing with it? And that's thinking I'm always is what's the lifespan of this product? And so if I'm selling you that painting, my goal is that that painting will be with you forever, and that it goes on. And if it ends up in a thrift shop and somebody like me buys it for $5 and paints over it, great, because it's still it's still marching on in life. And that's the way I like to think, is like, what are the steps? And so in terms of somebody receiving all this extra fluff in the packaging, what are they doing with all of that? It's just getting thrown out. Like nobody's keeping all the things, right? And
I have a bag of stuffing. And I can't tell you the joy I get, because recently the stuffing that I've started to get is that compostable stuffing, the kind that's made with potato starch. I still don't know what to do with it, because I still want to reuse it. And then that makes me think of something else that really works for me as a small business owner, because I buy all of these things from vintage shops and for food styling. And so to make things look pretty for Instagram, right? And that's a big part of my work, food photography. And then we have a Facebook group in our community that I understand it's become a thing now. It's a trend. It's a buy nothing, sell nothing group.
Oh, I'm in mine for my local neighborhood.
Yes, so there's tons of them around Canada and around Europe. And people it was started by a few neighbors, and now it's grown into this 5,000 person strong, so I have plates that I'm unpacking right now, and I know they don't work for our decor anymore, and I know I won't take any pictures with it anymore. And so there's this place that I can actually pass it on to people and then borrow things from them and then use that for maybe 6 months and pass it on. It's like a library of stuff.
Totally.
And
it's brilliant.
It's so beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, it's really brilliant. I belong to my local one and I love it. It's great. You mentioned food, so I'm just going to read out another response that we got from somebody who sent in how she's reducing waste. This is Heidi from The Simple Green, and if you are interested, you can find her on Instagram. She is, I believe, a Nikon ambassador. She takes the most stunning food and botanical photography that she very dark and moody. And if you live in BC, you have probably seen her work. She does a lot of work with Edible Magazine. So she replied and said she's a food photographer, and she eats and freezes everything she buys or makes for a shoot. Like nothing on her shoots gets wasted. And I know food photography used to be very high waste. And I think that is now considered the very old fashioned way to do food photography, those shoots where food sits out for the whole day and is not edible. And you'll see more and more food photographers now who are really working to make sure that everything that is on a shoot gets eaten or cooked or frozen or something happens to it. So it's not being wasted.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first food photography session that I attended. The person who was leading the discussion showed us how we can use a laminate spray on food to make it look shiny.
Oh my gosh, hairspray and yes.
Yes. And so I wanted to walk away from that presentation, because it goes against, you're turning food into something that's inedible, and you're turning most beautiful food that you've used to use it, the best ingredients, and it's no longer inedible after you use that spray. And then the other thing that gets my goat is the little crumble that happens right around plates. That might be just me, but any photo, any professional, yes.
Nobody sits down to a table like that.
Pick it up with your finger and eat it.
It drives me crazy. If that was your house, you'd be in there with a towel trying to here, let me get all the crumbs off the table. Yes, I totally agree. And that's another way that industry has changed, is it used to all be done under very heavy lighting, artificial lighting, which kicks off a lot of heat, uses up a lot of electricity, and contributes to the spoiling of the food. And now we're seeing this move where they are working really hard to do all natural lighting and do away with the lights. It's not always possible, but really shifting how the photography is actually done so that we're not wasting all this food that could be feeding people. Yeah. So I think that's really important to sort of like that whole thought process had to really change. And I think it was really the advent of bloggers that changed that, because they were not in a position initially to afford all that expensive lighting gear, and they were working, you know, in their home kitchen, and they had to get a picture quickly because this was going to be dinner tonight. And it's really changed how the industry actually functions. And sometimes that's what you have to do. And yet the quality of the photography is still excellent. So, you know, there's always another way to do things. We touched on this one a little bit, but including within our raw materials is also thinking about the path our raw materials take to get to us. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot when it comes to packaging, because you know, when you get like the Amazon box and it's this giant box and in it is your 2 markers that you ordered, like, and they're floating around in there, or you place an order with Amazon for 4 or 5 items, and one item comes one day and another item comes the next day. And it's ridiculous. We're shipping items in these giant packages that take up a lot of space on trucks. And then we're having, because we want all this in-time delivery, like immediate delivery of our goods, they're getting shipped to us when, you know, a truck might be half empty because these orders all have to get out today. And so thinking about, one of the things I've been thinking about is like trying to plan all my purchasing of supplies and materials so that I am placing one large bulk order with either my packaging company or the art supply place that I get my stuff from, and even sending them a note. And I think this is something super important for all of us, but also for our consumers. Sending us a note. I send a note and just say, wait till it's all ready to ship, unless something's out of stock and isn't going to come in, like send it all together. And most places are very happy to oblige with that. And you can also do the same as a consumer. When you reach out to somebody who's going to send you something, you can say like, I don't want all the extra packaging. Can you, like, it's fine. I don't need it. I appreciate what you do as an artist. I don't need the postcards and the tissue paper, crinkly paper that it all comes in the packaging. And that's completely fine. If somebody did that for me, I'd be like, yeah, no problem. It saves me money, right? It saves me money.
It's like the evolution of the food delivery apps, right? In the last 2 years, I've noticed in the beginning it was just, you know, get the food. And in the last year, I've noticed a lot of them have that little checkbox that says, let us know if you would like cutlery and napkins. And so if you don't check that box, the restaurant doesn't put anything. So it's all a matter of, you know, the market driving the change, because as people ask for things like that, companies will have to provide, right? I'm hoping even Amazon can be their speed to market and efficiency and all of the reasons that they say are the reasons why they have so much waste, because even the returns is such a huge problem. It's just ending up in the landfill because Amazon doesn't send them back to the vendor. It's not as what's the word, financially it's viable. Better for them just to take the loss.
And it just it makes my skin crawl when I think about how much.
No kidding.
Definitely.
So buy local when you can, but a lot of times things are cheaper on Amazon. So what you still have to make choices that are financially responsible for your own company, right? So,
and that's, you know, funny enough, I'm in a group, a rural creatives group, and we are all rurally located artists. So
which is a whole other set of challenges, right?
And it's, you know, even internet is a challenge. So like even the resource of the internet is a challenge, but sourcing supplies, how far we have to drive to supplies, the local availability of, you know, there might only be one paint supply store. And so if they don't have that item, you're forced to either drive 2, 3, 4 hours into Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, like go into a metropolis, or you have to order online, and you kind of have to, like, the devil you know, the devil you don't. It's such a tricky conundrum, I think, particularly, you know, rurally, like I have to drive everywhere to get things. And that's sometimes not ideal when I'm driving and I'm like, I just drove to get $20 worth of supplies and spent how much in gas, but I needed it today. And that's to what you were just saying, Melissa, is the planning. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, in a program that I'm in for product makers, they gave us an inventory supply sheet that we can use where that has like a whole bunch of, it's in Excel and it has like,
formulas.
Thank you. See, I can't even think of the word.
I'm doing my taxes right now, so that's why I'm like in it. So
anyway, it has all these formulas. You can do your inventory weekly, monthly, daily, whatever you want. And then it tells you when you can put in a reorder quantity. Like when I have 5 of these left, I need to reorder and stuff. So I have set that up and I do my inventory. I don't do it for product because I print on demand essentially for most of what I do, but I do it for all my supplies. And it has really helped me get my supply orders down to like maybe twice a year, because I have a pretty good idea at this point in my business of what my sales are going to be and how much I'm going to use over a span. And so I kind of go in and check every month. And if something is close to being low, I'm like, should I order it? But I don't need anything else. Okay, I know I have enough to get me through the next month. And if I don't, I can go to Staples and get a few rigid mailers. Like that's fine. There's a Staple 5 minutes for me. I can walk there. But if I save it and wait, I can do a bulk order where I'm refilling all of my packing supplies in one fell swoop. And it's one shipment, one order. And usually because I'm ordering in bulk, I'm ordering a larger quantity and it is cheaper than if I was just buying a handful. So that's something to think about, is bulk buying is often less expensive than buying in a minimal amount.
Yeah, that's something that I do in my food buying too, because anything that's shelf stable goes in the pantry. Buying in bulk, and if you buy in person, you can reduce a lot of the packaging. Buying bags of beans and lentils and oats, it works so well, and they last for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is another one for you, Puneeta. So most of us work from home, or we have studios, maybe offsite or maybe outside of our home. And so our kitchen or our studio is our lunchroom. And that gives us a lot of opportunities to actually reduce our waste, because we don't have to rely on single packaged food items. Think about, I just think about my friends with their kids and seeing all the things that go in the lunch boxes. There's the granola bar in the packaging. There is the little bag of snacky things in the packaging. There's the fruit cup in the packaging. Like it's all prepackaged food. And so this is something, we're at home, we don't need to have all that prepackaged food. And if we have people coming into our space to help us, like maybe you have somebody who comes and helps pack orders or does sewing bits and pieces for you, or whatever you need them for in your business, we have an opportunity to make our space much more friendly in terms of reducing food waste, but also packaging waste. Like, what are some of the things we could do there in terms of like cutlery, dishes, food, that type of thing?
I use reusable, even when I take away a lunch, and if I'm eating in the park, which I'm hoping the weather is soon conducive to that, I will carry my regular steel cutlery and my Tupperware, and I don't have any of the cool, bamboo cutlery and any of that, because steel comes back, you pop it in the dishwasher, you can wash it. And in terms of lunches, for me, it's loving those leftovers. You gotta love those leftovers and transform them. So I made these little fritters, lentil fritters, over the weekend, over Sunday. And now yesterday was Wednesday, and we needed to use them. I have this 3-day, you have to eat your stuff in 3 days or it goes in the freezer. So the lentil fritters went into a sandwich, and mayo on top. It's odd. My kids were a little bit surprised, but it totally works. I mean, leftovers, tweak them a little bit and they're delicious all over again. If you like them the first time around, you'll like them again this way.
Yeah. I think you can also do things like making sure if you have people coming into your house or your studio to work, making sure that you have cutlery that can just be washed or have glasses and mugs on hand so that people, this is super
so
interesting.
I keep the tiramisu, I keep the tiramisu cups, you know, those glass cups that come with the big jar, a big container of tiramisu, and I keep those for guests and for play dates and for friends who are dropping in. And so we use those as real glasses because they go in the dishwasher. And there's a lot of things that we can do when we don't think of the disposable as an option. If that's just not an option anymore, because it isn't, it never was, and it totally isn't now. So if we just don't think of having disposable cutlery, then there are so many options in front of us that we can just choose, that are more sustainable, that are reusable, and you can just hang on to them, let them get dented a little bit in the dishwasher, and that's it.
Yeah, it's funny. I know right now, particularly like in the print on demand space, but also there's a lot of makers out there because crickets are so popular now. People are like cutting vinyl and sticking it on everything. And one of the things that I know is super popular, particularly around Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Christmas, is the recyclable like the reusable tumblers for your drinks. So I was actually in a thrift store on the weekend doing a little bit of thrifting, and there was an entire section, not just a shelf,
it's
section.
like a pile.
Yes, of recycled of all these tumblers. So like I think that's another thing to think about when you see a market is really saturated and a lot of people are making something. Ask yourself where all those things that are being made are going to wind up, and is that an avenue you want to take your business down? And think about and hit up a thrift store every now and then and see what's being sent away. Like if you're seeing something that you make is winding up in an entire section of a thrift store, maybe it's not the thing that you should be putting your energy into. Maybe it's time to move on to something else. So
yeah, that's a good point. Check out the thrift store and see what's ending up there. And it's a lot of it is the conference swag also. I've got a couple of tumblers that I you know, it's been years and I don't know what to do with them. I passed them on in the Buy Nothing group, and now we still have a couple. And right.
And does anybody really want a tumbler with a brand logo on it?
Like, or a mouse pad? I mean,
no.
And you know, Heather, this is one for you, but I've been involved in the event industry for decades now. And one of the big things that in my last business there was the swag bag. It was like a lot of the reason why people justified the cost of their ticket. They knew they were going to get this amazing swag bag. But I cannot tell you how many times me and my business partner literally felt our stomachs clench over the stuff that people wanted to put in the bags. We vetoed so much stuff where I was just like, no, we don't need another freaking pen. We don't need another mouse pad. We don't need another USB key. And Heather, you work in PR where this is your deal, right? You're launching things, you're sending out packages to influencers and reviewers, and like, how do you counsel your clients on this?
And in fact, so I mean, honestly, this is going back quite literally even a decade ago. I remember saying no more effing branded aprons. Like, you work in the food space, you have one from every commodity. Like, we don't need any more. I have a favorite apron. I'm good. And now I'll tell you, I could always use another spatula, but
I was going to say I have two favorite spatulas that I've got from conferences. They're beautiful. And an apple slicer. Oh my God. So,
see,
yes.
so there's certain
favorites.
There's some favorites, and there's some things, funny enough, Melissa, from your former conferences that I like. My oven mitts are the oven mitts that I got at
I still use those oven mitts.
Years ago. And one of my cutting boards, that was a fun one to get home on the train, but the cutting board, but the swag, and I have that conversation now with every client, is it can't just be swag for swag's sake. It has to match the purpose of what it is. So if we're talking to you about recipe development and you were talking to you, so as an example, years ago, I worked in the beef industry. We were talking to people about knowing the proper temperature of when your roast is ready. And I said, well, who owns an oven thermometer? Well, that was our swag, an oven thermometer, a practical thing that quite literally 20 years later, all of those people who were involved in that still have that meat thermometer, because it will be with us forever. And I think that's a big thing, is what's the life of it and what's the purpose of it? And like, if the purpose is just to sell the thing, the laminated Mother's Day thing, you've done it wrong. Like, the purpose should be to get your art into the world. It should be to have you. And so that it's like connecting with the message, I think, is more important. But we're still seeing, and like, quite literally, funny enough, in our mail this morning, we opened it up and unsolicited tumble out a bunch of branded pens with our bike shop logo on it, unsolicited. And I said, oh my goodness, wow, this is like a note that says, we stole your logo and used it without your permission. And then sent it to you to tell you that we did such a thing. Would you like to buy some from us? Which is so weird, because we have a fabulous swag guy and we've used him for years, and he's of that. And I think that's the thing too, is my swag guy, who I met on Twitter like 100 years ago, he is all about sustainability. What's the client want this for? What's the purpose of it? Because for him, it's like that customer service aspect that he doesn't want me saying, well, I'm not going to use him again because nobody liked the aprons we got. It's not his fault nobody liked the aprons. It's our fault nobody liked the aprons, because they got something that they didn't need. And so I think that's part of like choosing your suppliers wisely, picking a partner so you can say, these are my goals. This is what my business is about. And if sustainability is a pillar or a foundation of your business, you have to bring that up with your partners and vendors and say, this is a pillar of my business. This is part of my business. So when we're creating this thing, it can't just be for the things making sake. It has to be towards the end of teaching people how to cook properly or use this art product or what have you. But yeah, we see it all the time with particularly food industry, but any type of blogger conference, influencer conference.
Even back to my corporate days, just going to a tech conference, like all the stuff you would get. I mean, you were guaranteed to get at least 4 or 5 USB drives and or mouse pads. And even thinking back to like the company that I worked for, you got these like gifts when you hit milestones and you got to pick from this catalog. And I remember when I had to do this, looking through the catalog and just being like, what the hell do I want with any of
these things?
It doesn't fit my personality. It doesn't fit the kind of things I want in my home. And I had to pick one. And at the time it didn't really occur to me that I could say, no, thanks. No. That would be looking ungrateful. So it was really challenging. But now at this point in my business, and I am in a situation where I get constantly people saying, can I have your address? I just want to send you something. And I'm very blunt about it. What is it you want to send me? Because, and they kind of hedge around like, oh, it's a surprise. And it's like, no, I'm not interested in a surprise. Like, I need to know what you're going to send me, because I'm very picky about what comes in.
Yeah.
And I have told more than one person, like, no, sorry, I'm not interested. That it doesn't fit into my lifestyle. And it's just something that I'm going to have to put in the recycling bin or in the garbage. And I don't want to have to do that. And it's a waste of your money, right? Mm-hmm. So it's something to think about if you run events like workshops or anything like that, where you might want to do a goodie bag. There's nothing wrong with doing a goodie bag, but you need to be really thoughtful about what is going into that goodie bag and who's going to be using it. And it's the same. A lot of us like to throw freebies into our packaging. Like, I just ordered a hoodie that I love from a Canadian company that kind of their logo is, or their branding is like buy it once kind of thing. But in the package, there was 2 postcards and a sticker, and they're lovely postcards. And it's a super cute sticker. but I'm not going to use them. And so I'm having to toss them out. And, that makes me think, because that's my go-to when I send something out to people, is I put like a little mini sticker in it. And it's like, should I be doing that? I have to really, I just realized how much it kind of annoyed me when I got it. So maybe I shouldn't be sending it out either. I don't know if they want an octopus sticker. Like,
is your octopus stickers. I stick those. I have your octopus stickers are all over my studio.
I have them all over the place. I love my little octopus guy.
I love it too.
But maybe not everybody else does.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that balance is so hard to achieve, right? The surprise and delight, because we want to over deliver and surprise a customer who's bought something. Like I feel that balance is so hard for business owners. Like, where do we draw the line and it's waste and they won't use it, versus, oh my God, an octopus sticker, it's so cute.
Well, the other part to that is, like I mentioned, stickers are not the best thing that I make when it comes to sustainability. So maybe my freebie shouldn't be a sticker. So I'm sort of rethinking that, which kind of brings me to like reusing the odds and ends. I mentioned it when I read out Jessica, how she tries to reuse everything. I loved her idea of organizing all her scraps.
Yeah.
Like I just thought that was brilliant. And some of the ways that we can reuse those scraps. And one of the things I like to do in my studio is go through, like, over to the side there, I have a closet which has all my odds and ends and my things that extra stock and stuff that I bought that didn't work for the product I was making. And I like to sit there and kind of brainstorm, like, what kind of product could I make from this so that I can use it and put it out into the world. And I've done that a few times. I've even I cut my own cardstock for my cards, and it leaves me with this little strip of paper. Like, what do I do with that? I have a lot of strips of paper. So now I use that as the wrapping on my gift tags that I make to sell. And I just put a stamp.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah. So if you sit down and you really think about, like, how can I use it? They look like scraps, but how can I use these scraps? I've seen some really cool things. I've seen people make cards out of fabric. So the card is a cardboard card or a cardstock card, but they decorate it with like a fabric collage or something. And I've seen somebody who does that as their thank you cards to their people who buy from them. They do a little note card with fabric scraps. So
I keep the art scraps and the fabric scraps that my youngest is an artist. But for Christmas and Diwali, when I do the little gift bags for friends, I use shopping, like regular store gift bags that often have the logo, like American Eagle or whatever else is on it. And then I put one of the scraps on it. And it looks pretty. And then I haven't bought a gift bag, but that's something I've been doing for years.
Yeah.
And people love it, and they appreciate her art, her little bits of art so much. And it's a way. I started it because I didn't want to have 300 pieces of art from the entire year. but it's worked out so well.
That's exactly, and that's like reusing my chart sketches and folding them in half and making them a thank you card. Like, it's perfect, and it gets it out of my house. It extends the life beyond just using it that once. But that, I'll tell you, Puneeta, in terms of using shopping bags like that, and maybe again, it's the kid of being in the 70s and 80s, but our Christmases still to this day, like our family expression, you do not trust that box because you are not getting a mixer. It might look like a mixer. Inside that box is socks or whatever, right? And so the box is never what's inside. And just this morning on Instagram, I'll tell you, I was blown away. A woman whose name is Natalie Papier. She's at Home Ec Op on Instagram, but she shared Stephen Wilson's studio, and he upcycles. All he does in his studio is upcycle luxury packaging. So you buy a Louis Vuitton purse, it comes in a beautiful Louis Vuitton box, and then inside that box is inside a beautiful Louis Vuitton bag. And so he takes that bag and that box and turns it into art. And it's incredible. The studio was just ridiculous. but now I have ideas for that random Louis Vuitton box I have sitting in the back of my closet that was too pretty to throw out. So I've kept.
Yes.
So I did that with the Tiffany bag, with the light blue Tiffany bag for a favorite gift 2 years ago. And then I put a little card on. It looked like the light blue Tiffany bag. I think I took a picture. And yeah, but it wasn't Tiffany inside. It was some homemade candied pecans. But
They were worthy of a Tiffany bag, right?
That's exactly.
I thought so.
Like all of that stuff we all need to think about when it comes into your house. And I just my birthday was earlier this week. A girlfriend sent me a birthday card, and on the back of the card it says, please recycle this card in a creative way. And I thought that was so cute. As opposed to just saying, please recycle this card, it said, please recycle this card in a creative way, which immediately I was like, well, now what can I do with this card? It's like challenge accepted.
And then it's a competition. Yes.
It really did. It was like challenge accepted. I really loved that. And that it's like making you think about the things that you're just like, oh, toss. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. I don't know. Like,
I want to add that.
I think it's changing the thought.
Yes.
Changing the thinking and then acting on it. I think that's the awareness, thinking, acting. I think we've built the spectrum of sustainability right here.
Yeah.
No, it's all baby steps, right?
It is baby steps, but it's just constantly being aware. I think that's what it is. It's the awareness piece, just being aware of what we're using, how we're using it, and where it's going to end up. And I remember hearing somebody say, and I wish I could remember who it was, but I heard this a few years ago, and she was saying that every time she brings something into her house, she thinks about where it will be in 10 years. And that shook me, to be quite honest. It really made me start to think like, and that is my sort of rule of thumb now, whenever I buy anything or bring anything into my home, is in 10 years, is this going to be in a landfill? Is it still going to be in my home? Is it going to be recycled? Like, where is it going to be? And there's a lot of things I've put back because the answer made me very uncomfortable. So but it got me thinking, like hearing that is what got me thinking. So we had a couple more tips that we heard from other people. Heather, I think you had a few. And I have one more that I'm going to read. This is from Nadine Dawson Inkster. She is a photographer, but she also has a creation business. And the type of photography she does not create a lot of waste, but the creation side is woodwork and trays and garden lighting and chairs. And all the wood she uses is recycled from people's fences or from construction sites. She removes the nails and hardware and reuses them as much as possible. And she even composts the sawdust and literally tries to use even the smallest pieces of wood. And she didn't say this in her thing that she sent in, but I know that she has also created some of her portrait photography sets, her outdoor scenes that a lot of photographers have, backdrops and stuff. I know she has created a lot of those from reclaimed wood and garden supplies. So that's another interesting way. So Heather, you had a couple.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm in this rural creatives group. And so I posed it to the group and said, like, how are you guys doing stuff? And one woman in particular, her name's Cassandra English. She runs it's called Wild Island Studio, and she is in Nova Scotia, and it's all natural textiles, which is so cool. And I have been thinking about that because stretchy jeans, like the stretch in denim, that does not break down. That does not break down like ever. And so while they might do great things for our ass, it does not do good things for the environment. So she talked, and this is a long post, I'm going to dilute it pretty quickly, but she talked a lot about fast fashion and like the things like Shein and other things that you just order and it comes and it's like, it's all polyester and it doesn't break down. And so it takes a long time. So her big push is going back to natural fibers, but she says, my business plays a role in this movement, working with natural fibers that can be composted. I also help reduce clothing waste by upcycling secondhand or damaged garments and contribute to sustainable fashion by teaching and offering mending services to prolong the life of clothing. On top of that, I source much of my fabric by donation from sewists, so air quotes, who are downsizing their collection, which keeps fabric out of the landfill. And she said, my business also composts all of its natural fabric scraps from sewing and use biodegradable packaging for shifting. And she also uses natural fabric dyes and reuses her water multiple times. So that's pretty cool in terms of her dye water, because she says it really impacts the amount of water that is used as part of the creation of the product. And so that, I think about that too, in terms of how much water I use washing paintbrushes. Like water is running and running and running and running and running. And
we don't think about water enough in Canada because we have so much of it. We are truly blessed with it, particularly here on the West Coast. I mean, water is what runs our electricity. We get a lot of rain. We can do rain barrel stuff. Like there's so much we can do, but most of the world does not have that. I mean, I remember talking to a friend in Australia eons ago about how they turn the tap off when they're brushing their teeth, which I never even thought of. Like you brush your teeth for 2 minutes, the tap's running just a little bit, but she's like, how could you do that? Because in Australia, water is very valuable. So yeah.
I just came back from a trip to India to visit my mom, and where she lives, there's normally not a water shortage, but for 2 days in the middle there was no fresh water. So what happens where she lives is that they get this fresh water, piped water from the city for 2, 3, 4 hours during the day. And then the rest of the time, and in that time, they fill up the tank they have this enormous tank on the terrace that fills up in that 3, 4 hour time. And then she has a backup tank, which she's built underground. So she fills that up. But for 2 days, they didn't get that fresh piped water. And that meant that the tanks weren't filling up. And then my daughter, on the third day, she turned on the tap and there was no water. And that happened for just maybe 30 minutes during the day. But she was so surprised that you could turn a tap on and there could be no water and nothing comes out. So you have to just wait. Like you have to think of alternatives in that moment. And it just brought home to me that we have so much water here. We don't think about turning the tap on, but where I grew up, we thought about the water all the time.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, when you think about, we have some Indigenous communities in Canada that do not have access to clean drinking water, which is just shockingly embarrassing in this day and age. But then when you see the water that they have to have trucked in, and it's all in the big plastic containers and plastic water bottles, and then some of these communities are having trouble getting the empty bottles removed. So they have these plastic heaps. And it's like, I don't understand how that is more economically, environmentally, or any way feasible than just getting them clean drinking water. So it, you know, most of us here are very blessed to not have to think about it, but water is a very precious resource that, Heather, did you have one more?
There was just one more that was in the thing, and it was really quick. It's a woman named Mags. She does a lot of stickers. And so she said, like, even the smallest thing, I will repurpose that sheet and send it back through to just stamp out every little bit. And she said she uses, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but I make a conscious effort to use spray bottles to limit the amount of water that I waste. So I'm not quite sure what Mags was using the spray bottles for, but you know, water waste, I think, is a big one, particularly for all of us. I do, like, one of those reservations that doesn't have drinking water is near me. I drive through it, and then I come home and I use fresh, clean drinking water that is like almost unlimited to clean my paintbrushes. And that, it's like, you want to talk guilt, like the guilt.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that at all.
But I don't understand how the pipes can't work then. You know, just take a detour.
But I think that, and in terms of our discussion, like, to me, that card that I got that said, please recycle this creatively, that was such a subtle but wonderful call to action. And that's, we said it at the beginning, but I think that's our role as creators. And I just this week, it's slightly off topic, but just this week, I participated and shared a whole bunch of things in support of #CreatorsSayGay, which is obviously in support of all people, but there was, there's a whole host of legislation that passed in the US this week that are really damaging to children's futures. And so this was a call against that. And I had so many people reach out to me on Instagram who were saying, thank you for calling attention to this. So we have power we have power in just saying this stuff. And so being able to say, hey, guess what I'm doing today? I'm using a Pringles can for I'm doing this. All those little things, it's like that one more little reminder, and not to make people feel guilty, but to say, I'm doing this one little thing and you can too. It's like, right?
Yeah, that little mention on the card of please recycle this in a creative way. Like there's nothing preachy about that, or it's not like you're trying to impose your values or your ethics on somebody. It's just like a suggestion, like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if you could do something really cool with this card when you're done with it?
Yeah.
And if we could think of more creative ways like that to just give people that little impetus to like, oh yeah, I could cut this up and put it on the fridge or turn it into a print that I hang on my wall, or, there's lots of things you could do with it. So I think that's really important. I actually just recorded yesterday an episode that will probably air after this one with a guest who does a fantastic job of using her platform to do good. And that's what we talked about in the episode, how so many of us have these platforms where we can really influence people without necessarily being too pushy or too preachy, but just by being passionate about what really matters to us. And I think that's really important to remember. Like creatives tend to be passionate people. We do what we do because we're passionate about it, and we have an opportunity, we have a voice, and we have we create things. We can create things that reflect our values.
We can create change. Like
yes, we can create
that.
Change.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, totally. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. We are doing this over Zoom with video, which is something I've never done before. So it's just been nice seeing your faces and getting to have this whole conversation. And I hope that all of you listening had an opportunity to kind of rethink maybe some of the things you're doing in your business. And we'd still love to hear from you. If you're doing some cool stuff, feel free to tag all of us. You can tag the podcast at And She Looked Up. You can tag Heather at Heather Travis, and you can tag Puneeta at, is it just straight up Maple and Marigold? Or
Maple and Marigold.
There we go. Tag the three of us, and we'd love to see what you're doing to kind of reduce waste in your own business. So yes, where else can they find you guys? Puneeta, where else can people find you besides Instagram?
Well, mapleandmarigold.com, that's my blog. And a lot of people email me on the blog. There's a button there. And then on Instagram. And you can also always DM me either on Twitter or on Facebook. It's Maple and Marigold on Facebook. And people ask me questions all the time. Find me.
Yes, we should also mention Puneeta is a regular guest on The Social on CTV, so you can often see her there. And you do a lot of other TV appearances.
I do CHCH Morning Live, Social, and a few other places. And it's been a lovely, lovely journey. It's a great way to reach people and increase awareness. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Yes. And Heather, where else can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at Heather Travis, or you can visit me on my website, heatherlynntravis.com, and it's Lynn, Lynne.
And that's where you can find all of us. And you can find the podcast at And She Looked Up on Instagram and andshelookedup.com. You'll hear it in the trailer at the end of the episode. So that's it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will be back next week with another brand new episode. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshelookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshelookedup.com, or come say hi on Instagram at And She Looked Up. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.